What I want to do right on the top of Newsroom tonight is take you through the inside story, the deepest thinking within the highest echelons of the Modi government on the Indian government's strategy to isolate Pakistan. We've been speaking to some of the top sources in India's security architecture, and we now take you through the plan about how India intends to go about winning the diplomatic war against Pakistan. The government is very clear. At the highest levels, the Prime Minister has said so himself, that Pakistan cannot go unpunished. That is simply unacceptable. The Prime Minister has approved of an effective retaliation plan. Remember, last time after 26/11, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh had heard similar options, but he did not give the go-ahead. Prime Minister Modi, we're told, has given the political go-ahead for action. But what form, time, and place will this action take place is something that's been left to the National Security Advisor and the three service chiefs. They've been given operational freedom to decide the method, the time and the place of the retaliation. A military response is unlikely during the United Nations General Assembly. The logic behind that is at a time when several world leaders are in New York is not the time India wants to be seen to be provoking Pakistan or engaging in any military action. This is the time to mount a diplomatic offensive, and for this, several central ministers are being sent to world capitals on a diplomatic offensive mission. One officer linked this to what Indira Gandhi did before the 1971 war. She went personally from capital to capital rallying support against Pakistan. An attempt is being made to do something similar, but by different senior ministers. It's also possible that an all-party meet will be called by the end of this week to appraise opposition parties about the government's plan so that there is a sense of bipartisan support. BJP leaders have been briefed by the defense minister. Several spokespersons were called in. They've been asked to be aggressive but not say anything irresponsible. An effort is also being made at this time to neutralize terror groups. There is information that at least 2 troops of terror groups have entered India via the LOC, and an all-out effort is being mobilized to ensure that these terrorists are mobilized. Let me now take you through details about this big diplomatic offensive that's been launched by India. Gaurav Sawant with our lead story on the Newsroom tonight.
Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif trying to drum up support at the UN General Assembly and trying to dodge the Indian media.
नवाज सर,
नो प्रेस सॉरी
सर एक सवाल ले लीजिए सर, जम्मू कश्मीर में जो अभी अटैक हुआ है,
एक्सक्यूज मी, नॉट नाउ.
His first day in New York ended with 2 big snubs from the United States and England. Pakistan had earlier written to the 5 UN Security Council members, US, UK, Russia, China and France, seeking support on the Kashmir issue. The US and UK immediately rebuffed efforts, with the US expressing concern over Uri with Sharif. Pakistan was also asked to prevent terrorists from finding safe haven there. Russia and Germany also expressed their concern.
We share the view that every country is responsible for taking decisive action against terrorism emanating from its territory.
China, an all-weather ally of Pakistan, all but named Pakistan in its official statement.
官方面通过对话协商解决分歧，并加强反恐合作，这样才能共同维护地区的和平与安全。
Pakistan meanwhile finds itself isolated in the sub-region as well, with at least 2 SAARC members ready to boycott the summit in November.
Under the leadership of the United Nations, we have to convene a global conference against terrorism, especially against those who sponsor terrorism.
Pakistan is clearly cornered, and Nawaz is doing what he does best, using the K-shield to deflect the real issues facing his country, even as the world's patience runs thin. Bureau Report, India Today.
And there has been a strong response from several world capitals already. India Today Strategic Affairs Editor Gaurav Sawant is joining us from Russia, from Bangladesh, from Afghanistan. We've seen strong responses already, Gaurav. Take it away.
Oh, absolutely. Now, when you look at commitment, John Kerry is hit out at Pakistan saying what Pakistan needs to do at this point of time is ensure that there are no safe havens for any terrorists in Pakistan. So that is a very, very strong criticism of Pakistan that comes in from the United States of America. Let's take a look at what other countries are saying. United Kingdom. Now, Nawaz Sharif went crying to UK, Theresa May, saying talk about Kashmir, but what did she say? Stand shoulder to shoulder with India against terrorism. China, again Pakistan's all-weather friend, higher than mountains, deeper than sea, but opposes and strongly condemns all forms of terrorism. So again, strong criticism as far as Pakistan is concerned. France, anyway a traditional ally of India, most firmly condemned terror attacks on the Indian army camp. Russia, again, very, very strong commitment. Russia said criminal act must be probed, perpetrators must be held accountable, and as Ambassador Karakin told me yesterday, will not carry out an exercise with Pakistan in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Bangladesh as close neighbors and allies, we will act together with India, and there's that big talk along with Afghanistan. Bangladesh, India, Afghanistan get all the SAARC nations together against Pakistan-sponsored terror.
Very significant this, Gaurav, because that also throws up the possibility of all these nations getting together and boycotting the SAARC summit in Islamabad. That would be a big embarrassment. Thank you so much, Gaurav, for joining us on the newsroom. In the midst of all of this, Nawaz Sharif himself is in New York. An Indian journalist was virtually thrown out of a press conference which Sartaj Aziz was supposed to address, saying Indian patrakar ko bahar karo. So much for all the jappi with Nawaz Sharif. Also, Nawaz Sharif himself was rather rude when Indian journalists tried to ask him questions in New York. Here's the full story.
Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, his foreign affairs advisor Sartaj Aziz running away from the Indian media, ducking questions on Uri. A tight security cover under the Pakistani leaders to stonewall questions on the Uri terror strike. Before Nawaz repeated his Kashmir rhetoric during his meet with the US Secretary of State, John Kerry.
नवाज सर,
No press, sorry.
सर एक सवाल ले लीजिए सर, जम्मू कश्मीर में जो भी अटैक हुआ है
Excuse me, not now.
सर,
Not now.
सर
We are
पूरी
going
अटैक
back.
पे सर
Excuse me, sir. Not now, please.
As Nawaz prepares for a fresh Kashmir rant at the UNGA on Wednesday, this is the proof he avoided. Recoveries from the Jaish terrorist, made in Pak markings on food. The arms haul, huge. AK-47s, hundreds of rounds of ammo, scores of grenades, 2 grenade launchers. It's clear the Pakistani terrorists had devastation on their mind. While Modi and company are biding their time, it is the External Affairs Minister who is all set to spearhead India's diplomatic war on Pakistan. And the first shots are to be fired next week at the UN General Assembly.
Pakistan has adopted as a policy of the state to sponsor terrorism. In the world, everybody realizes that the epicenter of terrorism lies in Pakistan. Let's wait to hear what Sushma ji says. I'm quite sure she'll very vigorously, forthrightly, very effectively put India's position on this in the UN General Assembly.
हमारी डिप्लोमेटिक ऑफेंसिव भी चलेगी, स्ट्रैटेजिक जो भी उत्तर देना होगा वो करेंगे. इतनी बड़ी कार्रवाई का जवाब देना है, प्रभावी रूप से देना है.
The army is already on the offensive at the LOC, with one of the most successful anti-infiltration operations in recent times. While hot pursuit may not be an option yet, the armed forces are intent on preventing a repeat of Uri. Bureau Report, India Today.
As India begins this big diplomatic offensive, behind the scenes, preparations are already being made for a potential military response as well. And one of the things that has deterred past governments and past prime ministers is the Pakistani threat, which suggests that the moment there is any Indian action, there will be an immediate nuclear response from Pakistan. Is that really the case? Well, we don't think so, and this assessment is based on Pakistan's own nuclear security doctrine. I now take you through Pakistan's own declared nuclear red lines. This was established by Lieutenant General Khalid Kidwai. Khalid Kidwai was the longest serving director of Pakistan's Strategic Plans Division. He is a very seasoned general, got multiple extensions, and established Pakistan's nuclear doctrine after their tests in the 90s. Now, unlike India, remember, Pakistan does not have a no first use doctrine and therefore keeps using the threat of using tactical nuclear weapons, and that is held out as a supposed deterrence. The whole idea behind trying to put out these tactical nuclear weapons as a deterrent is to ensure that there is no military action from India's side. So that's the broad context. Keep talking about how you will use a nuclear weapon to ensure that even the smallest military action doesn't take place from India's side. But how long can this game go on? How long can India follow this policy of strategic restraint? Let me now take you through what Pakistan's nuclear red lines are. Remember, Khalid Kidwai, the former director of Pakistan's Strategic Plans Division, actually spoke in a seminar in Washington about these nuclear red lines. We've looked at what he said at the Carnegie Institution, and that's how we've got these 4 red lines. Red line number 1 is the space threshold. If India were to conquer large parts of Pakistan, remember the word large there is very crucial because this is a word that's been used by Khalid Kidwai himself, the father of Pakistan's nuclear doctrine. So if India were to actually mount a ground offensive and conquer large parts of Pakistan, that's threshold number 1, which essentially means if India were to do this, Pakistan says we will go out and use a nuclear weapon. Threshold number 2, which is a military threshold of sorts, where India destroys large parts of the Pakistani army or air force. Hypothetically speaking, we use our fighter jets to go and bomb large parts of the Pakistani army or military installations. That too is considered a nuclear red line. Let me take you through provocation number 3, which is an economic provocation. This isn't spelt out by Khalid Kidwai in great detail, but several analysts suggest that this could potentially mean if India were to renege on the provisions of the Indus Water Treaty, for example, which is something that Pakistan is heavily dependent on, all the water that comes from Kashmir and Punjab into Pakistan as a lower riparian state. If India were to do that in an attempt to economically strangle Pakistan, that would be considered nuclear red line number 3. Then there is provocation number 4, which in Pakistani parlance is called a domestic threshold, which is if India were to do something which creates large-scale internal disturbances in Pakistan. If there were multiple bombs going off in Karachi, in Baluchistan, in POK, in Punjab all at the same time, or if politically India were to try and undermine Pakistan domestically, that too would be considered a nuclear red line. So we've just laid out Pakistan's own 4 nuclear red lines, and if you look at the essence of these nuclear red lines, there's a lot that can be done. The word large is used thrice, very crucial that word there, and also the fact that it's not a binary. It's not as if you either don't act, or if you act, there will be a nuclear retaliation. Joining us now on the newsroom tonight, I want to begin by introducing Christiane Fair. She's an associate professor at Georgetown University, one of the world's foremost experts on Pakistan, its military, and also the India-Pakistan relationship. Also with us is Dr. Sambit Patra, spokesperson of the BJP. Priyanka Chaturvedi is the national spokesperson of the Congress. The Congress, of course, upset that the government is not doing in government what they said they would do when the same BJP leaders were in the opposition. They were quick to target Manmohan Singh. So far, there hasn't been a response. And strangely and ironically, it's now the Congress that seems to be clamoring for a response, holding the BJP accountable to the promises they made while in opposition. I want to go across to Christiane Fair first. She's joining us from the IDSA this evening. Ms. Fair, we've laid out the 4 red lines that Pakistan's own experts have put out at various international fora. One of the key concerns, because if you speak to people in India, if you speak to people in government, if you speak to people on the streets, they want some kind of response. And the one concern they have is, if we were to respond in any form, will it lead to nuclear retaliation? Given all your experience and expertise, how would you respond to this, ma'am?
So, you know, it's really curious. I never heard a single I've never heard a Pakistani say that we cannot send a terrorist team to attack India because India has nuclear weapons, right? So this is a discourse that that really only Indians have. And I'm sorry, I have to take this out because there's a terrible reverberation in my ear. So that to me is really quite puzzling, that India exercises restraint when in fact India's own nuclear weapons should provide India with the same kind of immunity and impunity to prosecute sub-state options in Pakistan. Going to your specific question about whether or not their threat to use tactical nuclear weapons is credible, my answer is no, and I wrote a piece to this effect several months ago. If you look at Pakistan's doctrine for its battlefield nuclear weapons, actually you almost want to laugh. The doctrine calls for Pakistan to first detonate a tactical nuclear weapon at airburst on its own territory as a warning shot to Indian troops to not cross the international border. So this in and of itself is quite puzzling, because if you do an airburst of a nuclear weapon, you actually run the risk of knocking out all of your command and communication. So this is a very puzzling threat. The next level of escalation in their doctrine calls for the use on tactical nuclear weapons on Indian troops should they pass into Pakistani territory. Now this is a really interesting question for India to game. So if you look at the battlefield loss calculations from the use of these nuclear weapons, obviously India would be behooved to threaten major population centers in places like Sialkot or Lahore, because Pakistan's own fatalities would obviously be much higher than if India threatened to move across the Thar Desert, where there would be virtually no fatalities. So this gives actually India a lot of wiggle room to exploit the ridiculousness of Pakistan's
interesting there.
battlefield
Sambit
nuclear
Patra,
weapons
you
doctrine.
just heard Christian
The
Fair,
logic is,
one of the world's
in
foremost
using these
experts on
weapons
Pakistan's
Indian
nuclear arsenal and on the India-Pakistan relationship. She's saying India's nuclear arsenal actually gives India a lot of wriggle room. Instead, it's somehow seen as a liability all this while, that if we were to attack, there'll be nuclear retaliation, and that's the larger discourse that seems to be going around. On the basis of what Christian Fair is saying, and also on the basis of your own calculations, do you believe the time has come to call that bogey, that it is not a binary, it's not an option that you either don't do anything or that there'll be a nuclear war? As Christian Fair says, there's a lot of wriggle room, and that wriggle room needs to be explored. Dr. Patra.
First, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Christian Fair. I have in fact gone through a number of her books, and if I remember correctly, once a Pakistani had asked her a question as far as Kashmir is concerned, and the way she had given back to the Pakistani, saying that the plebiscite of UN in fact was conditional and sequential, was a phenomenal answer, which I appreciate. Having said that, as far as nuclear war is concerned, see, I am the spokesperson of the ruling political party, so I have to be extremely cautious when I even utter the word nuclear war. Rahul, I would say that whatever has happened in Uri is extremely is dastardly, and something which we all have blamed Pakistan for, which we all say that, as the Prime Minister had pointed out, the perpetrators from Pakistan will not go unpunished. They would be punished. But as has been stated by DGMO yesterday, that the green flag has been shown to the army, as you are also pointing in your report, and the army will in fact now select the time, the place and the way of action. Let that be the choosing of the army. Let not me as a spokesperson of a political party reflect on
and I want to
this.
put that question to Priyanka Chaturvedi, because we're seeing from the Congress a certain sense of impatience. When you were in government, we didn't see any form of military retaliation from the UPA. Now when you're in opposition, you're holding, you're constantly urging, you're almost seeming as if you're provoking the government into going out and doing something. We heard the Director General Military Operations say there will be a response, but that response will be at a time and place of India's choosing. Should there not be a more bipartisan approach, Priyanka, to the provocation, instead of seeming to politically provoke the government?
Okay. No, a couple of things I'd like to make clear here. Firstly, I couldn't hear what Ms. Fair's argument was because my phone got disconnected, so I couldn't really hear what she was saying. Secondly, I do not understand why do you think it is, we are not showing the spirit that needs to be shown, where we have categorically, time and time again, every day of our press conference I mentioned, whatever decision the government chooses to take, we stand by them. We stand together as far as nation's security is concerned. But yes, We are not talking about military options. What we are talking about is a strategy which the government is also clear about, which we do not see coming. We saw similar words coming from the government during the Pathankot attack, Gurdaspur attack, and now we are seeing similar words being spoken with this particular attack, the Uri attack. So what we want and what we are expecting of the government now is to come out with a strategy to understand how to best tackle Pakistan. We are not saying have military action or do what is needed, or call out a war there, or go into a war with Pakistan. What we're saying is come out with a strategy which isolates Pakistan, which exposes Pakistan and all their terror activities that they have been indulging in over the years.
You're accusing the Modi government of being inconsistent. You're saying that there is more talk, less action. Is that a fair charge? The opposition levelling that there is constant inconsistency, that the government unable to take a firm line, they're talking big but doing little. I'll put that question to Sambit Patra and Krishnan Fair when we come back. On the other side of a very quick break, you're watching the news. Welcome back. You're with us on the newsroom. At this time, we've got Krishnan Fair, one of the world's leading experts in Pakistan's military and on the India-Pakistan equation, joining us on this broadcast. But I also want to first take you across to Uri, where my colleague Padmaja Joshi spoke to villagers. She went out and about Uri town, to the adjacent villages, and found a certain sense of fear amongst people who have relatively been untouched by terror. They've not been swayed so much by terror, unlike some of the other places like Anantnag or Kupwara, Srinagar or Atral, but where there's now a fear that if an army brigade headquarters is not safe, then what about their houses? Padmaja Joshi with this ground report from Uri for the newsroom.
A study in contrast to violent Stone Valley. Uri has been a picture of tranquil, snubbing the repeated strike calls. But the deadly terror attack on army camp changed things for the worse, forcing a 2-day-long shutdown. But now, this township on the LOC is trying to be back on its feet. Markets have reopened and traffic is back on the roads. This 80-year-old teacher asserts, Uri is Aman Pasand.
हमें ये फख्र रहा है कि हम कभी एंटी एक्टिविटीज के साथ ताल्लुक नहीं रखते, न हमने कभी रखा है।
हमारी समझ क्योंकि हमने देखा नहीं, ऐसा कोई माहौल नहीं है यहाँ। हमें भी लगभग 90 से इस वक्त कोई ऐसा मामला नहीं है। हमारे मार्केट में आसपास कोई ऐसा मामला नहीं।
Due to enhanced security measures, the transit route which passed through the army camp is shut for now. Locals hope it will reopen soon.
पहले कभी ऐसा देखा है? पहले पिछले 40 सालों में?
नहीं, इधर नहीं, प्रॉपर उड़ी में नहीं देखा। बाद में मतलब ये चीजें साइडों में देखा होगा, सुना होगा कि मतलब ऐसे फायरिंग होती है, लेकिन इधर प्रॉपर उड़ी में नहीं।
Locals here have always shared a special relationship with the armed forces, often benefiting from the symbiotic ties. Vegetable seller Sarjeet Singh, whose family is staying here since 1947, is hopeful.
हड़तालें करने से ऐसा कुछ तो हो नहीं सकता है। बातचीत से जो मसला जो हल होगा, ऐसे तो जा नहीं सकता कुछ।
Immediately after the terror attack at the army camp in Uri, the entire marketplace, a busy marketplace, a bustling marketplace, was shut for a whole 2 days. But finally, on Tuesday, it has opened its shutters. All of the marketplace is now bustling with activity, mind you, at a time when the rest of the valley is in a state of shutdown. लगता है इससे कुछ भी फर्क पड़ेगा?
जी, इसमें आवाम को कोई फर्क यहाँ पे नहीं पड़ेगी, ये तो हो जाएगा, फिर वैसे ठीक हो जाएगा।
Everything has very quickly come back to normal as far as people in this area are concerned. It's just another day. With video journalist Ravikant Otawar in Uri, Padmaja Joshi for India Today.
The Indian government at this time taking a very hard look at options post the provocation of Uri. I want to go across to Krishnan Fair because, ma'am, you've studied at length India's options. You've also assessed their strengths and weaknesses. Given the fact that India and Pakistan are both nuclear armed neighbors, because we've seen that Pew Research which says that 65% Indians would like to see some kind of a response from the Modi government. Which of the multiple responses available on the table do you believe would be the best given the situation India faces? Ms. Fair.
So look, I think this is a question that's really best posed to someone who's actually close to your military, because what I've observed in the Indian discourse is there's been a lot of discussion about what would be nice to do. But my understanding is that after the Gurdaspur attack, there was an interest, for example, in launching punitive airstrikes across the LOC using precision-guided munitions well within Indian airspace, but that the conclusion was that Pakistan's air defenses were rather robust, surprisingly so, and that therefore deprived India of that option. So I'm not really well situated, speaking bluntly, to say what the actual options are. But I can say that there are a range of possibilities. I mean, I think that if India did have the capability of conducting strikes across the LOC, particularly if they were within Indian airspace to take out terror camps, this would be something that Pakistan would simply have to suck up. Pakistan would have no support to do anything in response except to suck it up. And I've actually been quite heartened by the international response to this. I wish that, for example, President Obama and earlier after Uri, the State Department's formal response to Uri, I wish that they'd actually mentioned Pakistan formally. But I think that the way in which the United States in particular is responding to this has been quite different. You know, in the past, the response would always be, you know, we encourage restraint, we encourage dialogue. You don't see that kind of language, and I think that's a really important shift. So I think the most logical and one which stems most directly, you know, that deals most directly with the problem is some sort of surgical strike across these camps. There are also a number of options short of war that I think, you know, are certainly possible. Now, I want to say very forthrightly that if India reneges from the Indus Water Treaty, no one should think that's not an act of war. That will be considered an act of war, and I'm not sure that that would generate a lot of support internationally, because you're not punishing the deep state, you're not punishing the terrorists, you're actually punishing ordinary Pakistanis who depend upon that water. So I know that's become very popular in the last you know, several days of news cycle, but I think that's a very imprudent response. There are other things you can do. Deprive Pakistan of its most favored nation status. It doesn't cost Pakistan a lot of money, but it's an important signal. You can downgrade Pakistan's embassy. You can oust. You can PNG the ambassador. My favorite is PNG the defense attaché. Everyone knows the defense attaché is the ISI station chief. So I think there are a lot more options than might seem at first blush. But I think the other thing I would perhaps consider staying away from, I know there was a lot of interest and support for Modi raising the Balochistan issue. I certainly personally agree with that. But I think that runs the risk of making this thing at the UN look like an India-Pakistan tit for tat. I think India is better served by really focusing like a laser on Pakistan's support for terrorism. I think going to the United Nations and really trying to get more support for further designations, it will put China in the hot seat for sure. China has been very reticent to support designating Pakistan's beloved proxies, but it'll put China in the hot spot. Why is China continuing to defend the indefensible? So I think there are a lot of options.
Think about this diplomatic offensive, Ms. Fair, that India has launched. We're going to see, Ms. Fair.
Why doesn't India? Oh, please.
Kristen Fair, I'm saying that India, the Prime Minister is going to be sending ministers to several world capitals.
It's being called Ms. Fair.
The Prime Minister is going to be sending several ministers to world capitals in a bid to rally support. They're calling it a diplomatic war of sorts against Pakistan. Do you believe this will in some way help isolate Pakistan, have it perceived as a state that sponsors terror? Because in the past we've seen America in the end continue with military aid, economic aid to Pakistan because of its own geostrategic realities.
Okay, first of all, India should declare Pakistan to be a state sponsor of terror. I think it's really interesting that India is clamoring for other countries to do something that India itself has not done, even though India is actually, in this particular case, the direct victim of this. So if India is not willing to call Pakistan and declare it legally through the Lok Sabha a state sponsor of terror, it's a little bit much to be asking other nations to do that when they're indirect victims of this. But in the case of the United States, we're not indirect victims. We're actually direct victims. I would argue in the last 15 years, more Americans have been killed by Pakistan's proxies than have Indians. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the United States does with Pakistan. The problem is when we invaded Afghanistan, we had no other way of supplying that war. And so if you were an American planner for this war, you had no other option but to rely upon Pakistan. So this is a problem that the United States has in managing its different objectives in the region. But I will just caution that in between 1990 and 2001, Pakistan was thoroughly sanctioned. It could not have been under more sanctions. And yet in this exact period, it was robustly maintaining a proxy war in Afghanistan. It was wrapping up its support for the Kashmir insurgency. And in addition to that, it was massively expanding its support for insurgency and terrorism in Kashmir. So don't expect that diplomatic isolation is going to make Pakistan stop using terrorism as a tool of foreign policy.
Those are very strong points from Kristen Fenn. I want Sambit Patra now to respond, because with all her experience and expertise, she's saying, why doesn't the Modi government begin by declaring Pakistan a state sponsor of terror? You want America to do it, you want France, the UK to do it. Why doesn't Delhi start by doing it itself?
In fact, I was hearing Dr. Flair quite intently, and she has spoken out some options. Two important points which I would like to carry forward before I specifically answer your question. Number one, she rightly pointed out that there has been a paradigm shift as far as the US disposition is concerned, that previously US only spoke of restraint and US was quite equanimously positioned. For the first time, it seems that US speaks in a voice which is supportive of India, and this is what Mr. Modi's regime has gained. Secondly, we should be reminded of the fact that somehow tactically Pakistan is trying to shift the focus that has gone towards Balochistan. I mean, though Dr. Flair
answering the question, it's a very simple question. You want the world to declare Pakistan a state sponsor of terror. Let Delhi start by doing it itself. Do this tomorrow. You can do it. Nothing's stopping you. Why haven't you done it so far?
I think the government is inching closely towards it, because for the first time we have seen on the floor of Parliament on multiple number of occasions the Home Minister himself have directly named Pakistan. We saw only last time when the Home Minister said that whatever was done in Kashmir was because of direct intervention of Pakistan. So I believe when the Home Minister is directly implicating Pakistan, naming it on the floor of the Parliament, it is just a step away from what we are expecting, what we are talking and discussing. But that's a privilege of the Parliament which I think I could not preempt on a news show. Let the Parliament decide on it. It's an all-party affair, and I'm sure
Priyanka Chaturvedi, final words from you. Will the Congress back the BJP government's move, if at all? There is a formal move to legally anoint Pakistan a sponsor of terror, at least from India's perspective. Quickly, Priyanka Chaturvedi.
Absolutely, absolutely. Considering how Pakistan has over the years encouraged and abetted the entire terrorism coming into our country, if this government chooses to take that stance, we are with them. Anything that protects and safeguards our nation, we stand shoulder to shoulder with the current government. This is something I have been saying even at the beginning of the show, and I'd like to reiterate at the end of the show.
Okay, good. It's good to see some sense of bipartisanship when it comes to politics, because remember, you can't play politics with terror. There has to be a bipartisan response. Sambit Patra, Priyanka Chaturvedi, and most of all, Kristen Fenn, for joining us with your very deep insights on this subject. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much, all three of you. The point that I wish to make, and I think that's the point that Kristen Fenn made again and again and again, that it isn't as if there will be nuclear retaliation if there is any form of military action. She said that Pakistan will just have to suck it. Those were her words. If there is some kind of airstrikes across POK on terror infrastructure, a message has to be sent. And as the Indian government said, it will be at a time and place of our choosing. We're slipping into a break. When we come back, India bids a tearful adieu.